Welcome back. Former President Donald Trump this morning directly addressing a topic that could be one of the biggest issues in the 2024 race: abortion. After months of mixed signals about where he stands on abortion policy, here's what he said this morning.
My view is now that we have abortion where everybody wanted it from a legal standpoint, the states will determine by vote or legislation or perhaps both, and whatever they decide must be the law of the land, in this case, the law of the state. Many states will be different. Many will have a different number of weeks, or some will have more conservative than others, and that's what they will be. At the end of the day, this is all about the will of the people. You must follow your heart or, in many cases, your religion or your faith.
Let's talk about this. NBC News correspondent Garrett Haake is joining us, Republican strategist and MSNBC political analyst Susan Del Percio, and Democratic strategist Basil Smychel's here as well. Garrett, what else did Trump have to say on abortion? That was just a clip. And how does what we're hearing today compare to what he said before?
Well, Anna, Donald Trump has taken just about every conceivable position on the abortion issue during his time in public life. But where he has landed today is this idea of punting the issue away from the federal government and leaving it to the states. It's the kind of answer that's not likely to leave really much of anyone happy. A lot of conservatives wanted him to come out in favor of a federal ban, and perhaps at 15 or 16 weeks, perhaps even earlier than that. And of course, if you're someone who wanted to see expanded protections for abortion rights around the country, leaving it up to states and getting rid of Roe versus Wade, which Trump claims in this video was something that everyone wanted. It's simply not true. It's not going to be satisfactory for you either. Throughout this video message, he sprinkles in asides about the importance of winning elections to get your preferred abortion policy, essentially whatever it might be. And I think that's kind of the tell here. This is not an issue that Donald Trump is as comfortable talking about as a lot of other Republican candidates. And I think it's something that he wants to try to clear the decks from by basically saying this is going to be a state issue, not a me issue, but by continuing to embrace being the person responsible for getting rid of Roe versus Wade, and for continuing to make some kind of outlandish statements in here about abortion that he says Democrats want up till the ninth month or even beyond, which is of course not a thing. He's not going to make anybody happy here. I don't think we've heard the last of this issue, but you do see him trying to clear the decks on an issue he's just not that comfortable talking about.
So, Susan, Trump has been kind of all over the map on the abortion issue. He's talking about that today. Also IVF, which has been a hot topic since that Alabama ruling. Here's more.
The Republican Party should always be on the side of the miracle of life and the side of mothers, father, their beautiful babies, and that's what we are. IVF is an important part of that, and our great Republican Party will always be with you in your quest for the ultimate joy in life.
Susan, after this video this morning, is it clear to you where Trump stands on abortion, on IVF, on women's reproductive rights?
No, because Donald Trump has never had a core value when it came to any of these types of rights. He does not care about the issue of abortion. He used to be pro-choice, but when he thinks of it as a compromise, 15 weeks, 16 weeks, or the states, he's not talking about life, which most Republicans are when they are talking about the issue. So I think the big question Donald Trump is going to face in his home state of Florida is, does he support the new 6-week ban? And on top of it, will he be voting for or against the amendment this November to enshrine abortion in the Constitution?
And actually, he was asked about that Florida 6-week ban last week. He punted, said, I'll have my abortion policy next week to talk about. This is the statement we presume that he's addressing it. And so what's your reaction to these comments we're hearing today, Basil? And Democrats largely view this as a winning issue for them now, right? What do they do in response?
Well, there are a couple of things. One, you do see his tip of the hat to acknowledge that this is a mobilizing issue in states. Now, of course, he's looking at it from a Republican point of view, but what Democrats are doing is saying, yeah, bring it on, because what we've seen seen in multiple states already, what we will likely see in Florida, are voter after voter coming out across political persuasions between urban, suburban, exurban, rural areas coming out on this issue. When you think about the money that Joe Biden is raising, for example, some of that money is going to state parties. That's really important because that lifts the entire ticket. So if we're talking about moving this issue to the states, all that does is give state parties more ammunition to say, with Joe Biden's fundraising, yeah, we're going to start really putting money into these state legislative races so that they can now have an effect on this issue in their states.
And that's a great point also, because when you do put money into states, which the Republicans will not because they'll be all going to Donald Trump, but like a state like Florida, you can do a massive voter registration drive on such an important issue that you maybe never will be able to do again.
Well, speaking of money, we did get some new fundraising numbers from both sides this morning. So fill us in, Garrett. What do we know?
Yeah, look, the Biden campaign and its allies continue to have a fundraising lead both in the month of March and in what they have in cash on hand over Trump and his allies. But what we saw over the weekend was Trump having this gangbusters fundraising event down in South Florida in which his team raked in more than $50 million for his campaign, a huge boost when it was badly needed. But the caveat here is this was mostly from donors who have maxed themselves out and won't be able to give again. Biden still with the fundraising advantage going into the summer.
And Susan, Trump had this big fundraiser over the weekend, $50 million in one night. Sounds like a lot of money. And of course, he needs that money not only to do what he does as a campaign, but also for his legal issues that he's facing. And so will this $50 million, knowing what we know are the expenditures, make a big dent?
No, because it's how you spend the money. And he's spending it on his legal fees. Let's just say it's $25 million to legal fees. The other $25 million should be going into the state's coffers to build up their ground game, which they have none as the Republicans right now, especially in a state like Michigan. So $50 million, it's a great number. Listen, anyone would be happy to put it up, but again, it's not just about having the money, it's how you spend the money.
And Basil, at that same fundraiser, Trump was talking to his millionaire, billionaire supporters in the room about making sure he is going to keep their taxes low. Right. That has to be music to the ears of Democrats to be able to shine a light on.
That certainly is. I mean, you're only voting for him, you're only supporting him because he's going to keep money in your pocket if you're a billionaire. But what about the average person who is still, from their perspective, still struggling in this economy? I think the numbers are better than that. But there are a lot of voters that are still concerned about this economy. They're concerned about their economic aspirations. Donald Trump is not going to talk to those voters about those economic aspirations. I think that the Democrats will, and that's where the money comes into play, because Joe Biden can have that longer, deeper conversation with the voters.
Switching topics here, over the weekend, Trump went after the judge in his New York hush money case, and he wrote this on social media. Quote, "If this partisan hack wants to put me in the clink for speaking the open and obvious truth, I will gladly become a modern-day Nelson Mandela. It will be my great honor." Basil, your reaction to this comparison?
He really needs
Nelson
to just
Mandela.
shut his mouth, honestly.
Yeah.
Just shut your mouth. I have nothing more scholarly to say on that issue. Just shut your mouth. You're not Nelson Mandela. You're a joke. And you're not doing
this
this.
The 27 years of prison time that Nelson Mandela did.
For nothing so nearly as honorable as Nelson did it for. But that is the only way. Just shut your mouth. We're tired of it. Good Lord.
Basil Smikle, Susan Del Furcio, thank you both so much. Garrett Haake, thank you for your reporting.
Hey everyone, MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.